So if you want to take a quick chocolate break, you can indulge in front of us. Okay. We don't have it on here, but that's okay. Okay. Well, we are Team Votum. We went to Votum Construction, and we had a great team experience. I feel that through this past 24 hours, I made some new friends. I got to meet some new people. Like the rest of you, I didn't know their names before we met, and now I feel like I know you a little bit better, and your families and your work and how we work together as a team. We enjoyed ourselves. We met with Vernice Atkins Bradley. She is a CEO and leader here in Orlando, Florida. She's been here for over 30 years. She's a general contractor, and she's been working with one of the largest general contracting companies in the United States called Turner Construction. 4 years ago, however, she felt called to serve the local community here in Orlando, and she started her own company called Votum Construction. She's 4 years now in this new role, and she just gave us a great opportunity for us to walk with her in the journey that she's going through. This is her company, Votum Construction. Her mission statement is to create a brand identity that vows, that word's important, we'll discuss it a little bit later, to serve our clients by providing the best in-class construction service while enriching the lives of our employees and being socially responsible in our community. She's got 3 values that she came up with for her company: integrity, excellence, and solidarity. And that definitely came out in our interview process. Before we get into our interview time, we can just share a little bit about how we organized as a team yesterday. And we used this framework. I don't know if all of you are familiar with it. It's a Building Powerful Ministry Teams framework. It's something that I felt is very helpful, and there's 6 characteristics, and they give me a checklist of how to organize teams. And it's something that I've used in the past, and I think the team was grateful enough to allow me to facilitate a little bit in organizing ourselves and how we did our work. Just to go through it real quick, the 6 characteristics. It starts from the top: common purpose, clear roles, accepted leadership, effective processes, solid relationships, and excellent communications. And here's how we organize that for ourselves. I know those words are a little bit small. We first just spent some time getting to know one another. We're making introductions, solid relationships. So we spent probably 20, 25 minutes just hearing each other's story, learning about our families, where we work, what we do, who we work with, and then opening our time in some prayer together. Then talking about our strengths, we used the Myers-Briggs and Berkman, at least for myself a little bit, and some of the other Strength Finders tools, understanding how we can fit and use clear roles in serving and helping one another on the team. We then developed a meeting agenda, effective processes, and I enjoy flip chart paper, and so we wallpapered our room, and we had a good time with that, using that to build our agenda. We then defined our outcomes. By the end of our 24-hour challenge, what do we want to have accomplished, both for the interview process as well as for us as a team. And then also executing our agenda. That was the body of our time together. And then evaluating our meeting. We spent some time coming back to solid relationships. How did we enjoy this experience working together? What did we learn about one another, and just kind of processing our time together? I'm going to give the time to Aaron, and he's going to introduce some of our outcomes.
All right, as we went through that process, we felt it'd be good for us to double back for your sake to talk through those outcomes and what am I clicking on here? Right click. Okay, there we go. And talk through what it is that that really helped us steer our ship. As we talked, we realized we could do the task at hand. We could conduct an interview. We could put together a presentation and still not accomplish and learn all the things that we could get out of it. So we wanted to be very clear about what it is we wanted to value and approach through this experience. And so the first one you see there is learning objectives. We wanted to have learning attitudes. We wanted to have a humility and a teachability of heart and mind as we went through this process together. And specifically, we wanted to learn how Vernice leads, and we wanted to learn how she's effective. But we also wanted to learn how our team works. How is it that we could come together 24 hours and make this work? And then how to engage a leader from another context. We don't regularly get these opportunities to go meet with business leaders, and so how can we sit down at that table and learn and engage with her in an effective manner? The second one there is effectiveness and excellence. We wanted to be effective in what we do and excellent, and so with that, we wanted the right people doing the right things, right people in the right roles, and so we talked about our strengths and weaknesses and what we do well. We wanted to have a clear presentation. That was a value of ours coming in, and so we planned and processed and started putting our slideshow together very early so we could have a clear presentation. We wanted to represent Vernice well. We wanted to advocate on her behalf. We'd want her to be encouraged by what we had to say about her. And then the last one, we wanted to be teachable and we wanted to listen. We wanted to be excellent at those things. And then the last one there, we wanted positive relational dynamics. We wanted to be a team in the true sense of the word. We wanted to work together, love one another, encourage one another, engage with one another in a really positive way. And the same with Vernice. We wanted her to leave our meeting being encouraged by what we discussed with her. And so we went through all those things, and that really helped us have our marching orders as we went through how we're going to do the interview, how we're going to do the presentation. We kept referring back to this. You know, is this helping us move towards what we want to do? And so as we got into it and thought about this interview, we're looking at the leadership framework. We had two kind of ideas or assumptions that we didn't want to make. We didn't want to assume that she was operating from the leadership framework, and we wanted to assume that she had a different culture, context, experiences than from what we had. And so we didn't want to try to ask kind of lofty or esoteric leadership questions. We wanted to hear her story, hear her context, have her speak from experience and her passions. And so as we thought about how to interview, how to engage her with where she's at, but make the connections back to the leadership framework, we really crafted an interview that would get at each of those things, but not be in kind of a detached leadership framework sort of language, something that would allow her to share her story and let us see her context. And so in doing that, we started with relationships, and we asked these kind of questions that would get at her story, her life, her experiences, rather than just kind of leadership. How do you do this? How do you relate? So we asked for her story. What are some of the character traits that make you an effective leader? What do you look for in a person and how they relate to others? With her employees, with the subcontractors she employs. And then how does her faith impact her leadership? We didn't know going in that she was a believer, but has a great testimony of faith that really informed who she was as a person and how she led. As a direction setter, how and when do you know the direction you've set is the right direction to go? What are some of the measurable things and things you look for with your team that let you know that you're heading in the right direction? As a spokesperson, as a new company starting in the middle of a recession and trying to grow, what are some of the ways that you've helped grow that network of clients? And she had some incredible responses to that we'll get into. And then how do you keep morale high? As a coach, talking about how do you develop people. If someone's unable to fulfill a task or to live up to responsibility, how do you come alongside them to give them the training, skills, encouragement that they need? And then what systems or processes do you have in place with your clients for feedback, with your subcontractors for feedback, and with your own employees? How do you build those processes into what you do? And then as a change agent, how have you led your company through difficult circumstances? And what did you need to do to bring your team through those transitions? And so we really crafted the interview around those things without kind of having a detached set of questions for her contacts. We really wanted to listen and engage with her story and her passions and her interests.
So we started off, of course, by introducing ourselves and sharing a little bit about us. But what was really important to us as a team, even as we began planning, was to hear her story. Vernice is an African-American woman, a small business owner. She has 3 children, 3 grandchildren. But we didn't know, she wasn't known by the organization. So it was really important for us to hear her story. And so we spent a lot of time listening to that. And so for me, it was probably the highlight. It was hearing about how the Lord has shaped her into who she is as a businesswoman and the values that she has. So I wanted to share some of the things that really stood out to me in her story and what shaped her. One of the things is that Vernice is one of 9 brothers and sisters. She comes from a blended family. Her stepfather was a pastor as well as a construction. He had his own construction business, and so the kids helped out with that. At the time, that was not something that she enjoyed, but it's pretty ironic to her that that's the area that she's gone into. She did go to college in Pensacola, got married at a young age, she said, so I guess that was during college, and had 2 children. That marriage lasted about 8 years, and then she ended up getting a divorce. And so she so much wanted to provide for her children and started looking at what she needed to do that. And she started working for the city of Orlando in legal services. And the important thing there is that by working in that field and working with single moms and unemployed people, was that she became an advocate for the underprivileged, for those who had difficult circumstances. And so that began to shape who she was as well. She went on from there to get a job for Turner Construction, which you may have heard of. It's probably the biggest construction company in the U.S., and worked her way up in that company. During this time, she also got a law degree, and as a single mom, she remarried a man who had a child as well. But one thing that she shared with us that really shaped her vision for what she's doing and why she's doing it is that someone had asked her to speak. Oh, let me back up. One other thing was that she was brought up to be involved in the community. She has lived that out. She has been on the board of many organizations here in Orlando. She actually, I just read the other last night that she's just stepped off the board, the council for developing downtown Orlando. And so that has been her way, not only of networking, but of being living out her servant-heartedness. But she was asked to speak to a group of young men who she described, she didn't even really tell us where she went, but she described them as caged young men. These were men that were in prison. And she was asked to go speak to them. So as she was there, her heart really was gripped by the fact that they were there and people really had given up on them. And so she thought, she even asked them questions. How did you get here? Why have you come back several times? You know, why have you been in prison several times? And so she saw that people had lost hope in them, and she wanted to provide opportunities for people and men like this. So she went to her supervisor and told him at the same time she felt led by the Lord to start her own company. And so that's indeed what she has done. They were very supportive of her, actually kept her on as a consultant, which gave her seed money to start this business. So she started Votum, and Votum is actually a Latin word for vow. And the vow that she has made is that her help comes from the Lord. So it was so great to hear that, her faith being the foundation, and what she describes her faith is a lifestyle. So then as we heard her story, we were listening for the leadership framework and how she leads her team. And so I want to go on and talk about that a little bit. The heart of a leader, she described that very well, lives that out. She said, I have a plaque in my office. When I asked her about her faith and how that impacts her leadership, she said, I have a plaque in my office that says, God is my CEO. And she tells people that on her team that they are each CEOs of the area that they're responsible for. As far as relationship with others, she says, I invite others to give feedback about me first. And then, this is actually relationship with others. Relationship with self. I invite others to give feedback about me first. She's very self-aware and wants to grow and learn. And then relationship with others, she said to us, I asked her what she looks for in people and how they relate to other people. What is it that she looks for? She said, I tell them that you need to serve yourself. And so at first I thought, you need to serve yourself. What does she mean by that? What she meant was you need to serve yourself, meaning we all need to be servants, no matter what position you're in. And she is a great example of that because she does so much volunteer work in the community. And then going on to looking at direction setter, she mentioned several times her strategic plan. She didn't really go into detail with that very much, but she talked about that, as well as keeping the vision in front of her. And then as a spokesperson, she actually said part of this verse. Well, let me just back up and say, as a spokesperson, I think that was one of her greatest strengths. She said she spends 60 to 70% of her time outside of the office, outside of the construction business, because she's building relationships in the community. But she says the verse that stood out to her with that is that part where it talks about how you will stand before kings. She has relationships with the mayor, with a lot of government officials, and trying to develop the community and really have an influence that way. So she's seen the Lord bring favor in the eyes of those. And then in the area of coaching, she talked about what really stood out to us was that she is concerned about the whole person. So she talked about really being involved, asking them about their family, having events, social events that included their family. If one of the guys had something going on at the school with their kids, that they were free to go do that as long as they let her know. But she wants her team to be a family. And she said, when you hire someone, she said, you're hiring for a position, but really what you get is the whole person. So we need to meet the needs of the whole person. And then in the area of change agent, I think that's just something that is natural for her. She showed us or talked about a situation where there was a problem on a job, and she went in to, they actually called her because they needed some negotiating between some of the contractors. And she could have gone in and fired the plumber because of the really poor job that he was doing. And that's what one of the other contractors wanted her to do. But as she heard his side of the story and the other, she was able to come along and ask questions. And she said, instead of pointing fingers, we asked the right questions. So that was great for me. I love asking questions. I'm an inquisitive person, but I've never really thought about it in the area of being a change agent. And then she also alluded to a few questions that she asked when she went in there. She said, first of all, what's happened? How can we avoid this in the future? And then what are our next steps? And I thought those were great questions to ask when you know that change needs to happen. And so those were the different ways that we saw the leadership framework played out in her life.
Okay, my name's Stuart. I'm with AIA, and we really, as we got to know Vernice, the more, and really heard her talk about her heart and her job and her vision, the more we could really see that a lot of who she is really does, and what she does align to our leadership framework. So I wanted to just point out mostly the similarities between how she leads. I'll mention a couple differences, but it was just kind of fun just to kind of, as she, like I said, just as she talked, how we could just kind of make the comparison to how we lead in crew. So first of all, the first R is, of course, relationships. And as we've already been talking about, it was just kind of refreshing to hear her talk about how important relationships were to her. And that would start off, as we've talked about, just with her relationship with the Lord. And how awesome is that, is that she's really committed to her new business of 4 years to God. So that was cool. And then also just with herself. And it was very apparent to me that she was someone who knew herself. She was very self-aware. She also, I would put it this way, she knew how to lead herself. And so very confident in her own skin. And so that's, I know for me, as I was observing her, I thought, this is someone I would definitely want to follow. And then others, just her commitment to people, her love for people, her desire to coach people and help them succeed. So, huge similarity to our model. Another similarity would be just her, just on the casting vision side. She sat there and told us a story, and of course it would take me way too long to tell you the story, but basically she told it because she wanted us to know that that's how she aligns people to what she's trying to do. She likes to tell stories. So very good on casting vision. And then I think, as Bonnie's already mentioned, just on the coaching side, she is really committed to her people in helping them grow. And again, just not in a fake way, but in a very sincere, authentic way. She really does care about the people that she leads. So just on the coaching side, very much a similarity. So differences, really not very many, but I'll mention a couple. One would just be on the spokesperson side. It was very impressive. Again, as Bonnie just said, she was very committed to getting out there and meeting as many people as she can, and as many groups of people as she can. She's a networker. And I'm not saying that's a difference with us necessarily, but I know for me it is, and it challenged me personally that I need to do a better job of that. In other words, I need to get out and meet multiple people and multiple groups of people if I can, just, again, as a spokesperson. And then on the coaching side, just a little difference that we kind of picked up on, and again, Bonnie mentioned this, just the idea that she had to make a tough decision about terminating somebody. And I know for us, that's something we'd rather not have to deal with, and as it relates to coaching. But the best thing we can do for somebody is to step in there and help them find a better place to grow and lead. And so and I know that for her, she didn't like doing that, but she knew it was the best thing for probably the person and in the company. So a little bit of a difference there, always a challenge. I know for me personally, I've never enjoyed that part of leadership, but it comes with our jobs, and we need to be committed to helping a person find a better spot and help them move on. So that's a little bit of a difference. And then just on the one more I'll share is on the aligning side of things. She has done an incredible job learning how to use the diversity issue, and in such a way that she, rather than in a confrontational way, she flips it and uses it in a way that helps actually her align other people to what she's doing. It's pretty amazing, actually, the fact that she's an African American woman and she can do that in a way that gets people to come with her and follow her.
So we talked about what are the implications of this system with crew. And the first part is actually asking ourselves about the relationships and her journey as an African American woman serving in construction, which is stereotypically male-dominated. And she's actually serving as the contract manager, and now she's actually going through this journey of actually telling people about her cultural journey and aligning people around her cultural journey. That's something that I think us within the crew system need to continue to develop a vocabulary for and to develop a heart for understanding. For many of us growing up in majority culture, that's not exactly something we would wrestle with. And I know growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio, that's not something I had to wrestle with because I was the minority among that. However, for us to start to live and look through the cultural lens is being able to see the stories of other people and living in their story. And that's the most effective way to reach our own hearts as well as reaching the hearts of others. So that's something I'd like to hope as an organization we are moving towards. And as we saw from her direction, she perseveres through a lot of adversity. She is seeing that her vision is not fully come to fruition yet. She's 4 years into her company, and yet there is still much work to do, but she's seeing how she's living her own dreams throughout that. As a spokesperson, we use this phrase strategic involvement because we find her being involved in so many government agencies, so many nonprofits. She's tutoring high school students. She's getting into the space where other people would not expect her to be at. And she's doing it on their terms. It's not so much what can she get out of this, but it's how can she be effectively involved in other people's lives, other people's agencies to build bridges to her own. For coaching, it's about holistic development. We use this phrase a lot in EPIC in how we want to develop the whole person. We can't just make you ministry effective, and we can't make you just soldiers. We want you to be whole people. We want to make all of our staff and students wrestle with some of the hard issues and to be open, honest, transparent, and being able to address those issues, the mess, the dirtiness. It's all part of the package, and we're all in that together, even if it's... So for her, she was mentioning how if someone's going to have a child, take time off. You need to take that time off. You know, if you've got an important event happening in your kid's life, you got to be there, and you need to take time off to do that. As a change agent, one of the things that we saw was that she didn't do it so that she could try to change people's perspective in this abrasive manner. She did it by winning people over. And so she would actually transfer the situation that Bonnie was sharing about this plumber. What would happen is she could have easily fired him right on the spot, but instead she worked with him, talked to him, and figured out an angle that actually he could do his job better. And he ended up becoming one of their major consultants for that arena. And so the idea of changing people or changing systems is how do we win people over within crew when there needs to be change happened, as opposed to simply let's just ramrod or steal or just run people right over. Instead, let's try to do what Paul says is win them over to what that agenda is.
Lessons learned. We came up with 2 lessons that we gained from this experience as a team, and then 3 lessons that we learned from our interaction with Vernice. The first 2 is common purpose. Tony was mentioning that this is probably the most polarized team he's ever been a part of. And I'm like, we're not polarized, we're well balanced. So we've got a lot of diversity. We talked about global and linear and abstract and concrete, and we've got all of that. So we worked well together because we chose to do common purpose. And that was a big takeaway, I think, for us as a team, is really aligning around that in the midst of our diversity. Clarity of strengths and roles, Bonnie mentioned that, being able up front to determine who can kind of take what role on the team. Interestingly, Vernice also asked us the question at the end of her time, if you were a piece of office equipment, what piece of office equipment would you be? And we all had to answer that question for her. And it really gave another explanation of the diversity, yet the unique roles that each of us play. Communication, again, being good spokespersons outside the organization. I think that was a takeaway for Stuart. Creating influence. This was something that she learned, that I captured from her, how she created influence with people. Herself, she would call herself an angry black woman, and when in her early stages of her business career. She would have a chip on her shoulder, and she would go and she would just express all her irritation. She had a story that she shared where that didn't work, and she took a different approach of understanding that person's story and actually sharing a story with them so she could win their mind and change their heart through giving them a different perspective. And that's how she influenced. And I thought, man, that's great, because sometimes we just come in with a big stick, at least in our mindset. And then context, being able to get into other people's story, being able to hear through good questions what they're learning, what they're experiencing, not making too many assumptions. That was a good takeaway that Erin had. And that is the end of our presentation, questions and answers. I'm going to give the mic to someone else. If you were a piece of office furniture, what kind of office furniture would you be?
Are you saying furniture or a piece of equipment? Oh, because we answered equipment. Otherwise, I have to be into upholstery and things like that. I answered the sticky notes that you put onto your documents that highlight certain areas of importance or actually make notes of things that are not important. So I think really critically about the information that we have put together, and I ask myself, what is the priorities? These are the things that need to be highlighted or expanded upon. These things don't necessarily need to be there. So.
Well, I answered a piece of furniture, so sorry, I'm going to go with that. It was actually a picture of our region that's right in my cube that I look at every day, and that represents the scope of 200 athletic departments in the Red River region, and most of the athletes on those campuses do not know the Lord.
And mine is probably more furniture than equipment too, but I'm an arranger, one of my strengths on the Strength Finders, and I do like to take a look at a project, something that needs to get done, and who is the best person to do it. So the only thing I could think about was a file cabinet drawer, because they're arranged by, in a certain order, but there is some order to what I do, but in each of I could think of those as categories and projects, and how they relate to different specific people and their roles.
I said a copier slash faxer, fax slash printer. I kind of like to wear a lot of hats and kind of be adaptable, and so do different things, but maybe sometimes like that same machine also be a source of frustration for others.
He wasn't a frustration. He did great. He was a multitasker, helped us with a lot of things. I chose a whiteboard. For me, that's creative space, and that's a place where you can put ideas on paper, and you have a meeting room and people gather together and discuss ideas. I really enjoy a whiteboard.
It's called Prezi. You can just go to prezi.com, and it's pretty user friendly. If you know how to use PowerPoint, it's pretty simple to put that together.
I gotta say a statement. Tony just learned how to use Prezi yesterday. He didn't use Prezi. He said, "I can figure this out. We'll just make it happen." And he actually figured it out yesterday.
That's a good question. I thought about that later. It relates to the way that she's involved in the community, but it is her long-term vision. She's only 4 years into this, and she said, as you know, it takes a while to get a business going and to get to where you want to be. So she has not been able to have a manufacturing firm where she can actually hire laborers yet, but that is her long-term vision, and that really helps her to set direction.
Yeah, I think part of it is her industry, working as a general contractor. They hire out to specific contractors to do HVAC or to do sheetrocking or whatever it is. And so she mentioned with her previous job with Turner, some of the contract negotiations, who she's looking to work with. I think there's probably some overlap there. But she's also in the process of putting together a plan for a manufacturing kind of factory for HVAC equipment, and so that would be the venue. She's got a neighborhood picked out, a community. She's talked with the leaders there, and so she is moving forward on that, but the industry and the time it takes to build those things is still in process. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we have any metrics or measurements, but I think we have anecdotal evidence of all those outcomes of just enjoying one another, of learning from one another. I think when we had discussions, when we were getting engaged with issues, when we were giving feedback, there was equal attention and earnestness in listening to one another, and then just spending time getting to know one another through the process and appreciate each other's gifts. I think we did that really well too.
I used the word polarized. I have to defend this now because it's, I've been called out. It was really tongue-in-cheek in my mind because I think as I've experienced my own growth in leadership, the personality skill set that I've developed has oftentimes been very polarizing in any team. And so I think that was probably the case for a lot of us too, that we didn't necessarily fall in the middle ground of anything. We actually were really good at some things really well, which is totally opposite from the other person. So it was a sense that since we were all leaders together, there wasn't necessarily, and we've already been in this position where we're in SLI, we're not looking to prove ourselves to each other, or we have to try to make ourselves puffed up against each other. It's more of, hey, we all have a common goal, and we're all high-functioning leaders, and we're all pursuing a goal together, and we can put an output that's going to be better and higher than anything else that we probably could have done if we weren't so at least just confident in developing who we are and understanding our strengths and weaknesses and just kind of going with it as a team together. So
I think we mentioned too that we did pray, but not just once, but multiple times, and I truly believe that's always a key when it comes to working together and working as a team is making sure the Lord's right in the middle of it, and we try to do that.
I'll probably need help answering this question a little bit. I think, so she shared a lot about her struggles as an African-American woman, especially in construction. And also, not only that, there's a sense of a minority construction company as compared to, say, Turner or something much bigger. And so there was always a lot of marginalization happening in her life as it related to people seeing her as, oh, the reason why you're a smaller company is because no one trusts you. Or in the same way, it was the same as being an African American in this in that industry. Is, well, we don't have those types of people. No one can trust you necessarily. And so she spent a long time, and the story that she explained was talking about a motorcycle, a bicycle, and a runner. And she compared Caucasian males to be the person on the motorcycle. She compared women to be the people on the bicycle, and she compared the runner to African American minorities. And so she talked a lot about how that differentiation led her to understand a different way of looking at something like affirmative action very differently compared to simply saying, hey, these people don't belong in this kind of education, therefore just kick them out, that's it. She was looking a little bit deeper on the complexities of, well, what happens when a black person goes into a school that, you know, they may have a chance, and they didn't necessarily take advantage of the full extent of that because, well, is it just because they were lazy or because they were uneducated? Well, no, actually part of it is because they weren't ready to take on that kind of responsibility. They didn't have the basic foundational education necessary to go into that without just saying, hey, affirmative action's bad because they just didn't do their job and they were lazy or anything like that. So to be able to explain that complexity, she was able to do that with a lot of her, to a lot of companies. Say, she was mentioning a firm in Kansas City, which was dominated by white males. And she was able to talk about that in a very calm, loving, and caring way. And she actually won those people over to that position.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is she doesn't group people or doesn't stereotype. She's very earnest and sincere in hearing people's stories, to hearing who they are in context. And so, you know, she started with legal services advocating for people, and you see behaviors sometime working with the poor where you think this action or this attitude it means this because that's what it means to me in my context. But when you start to listen to a story behind that, you can see that maybe no one just ever told them that was offensive, or maybe no one ever explained, you know, here's a better way to do this. And so listening to people in context, valuing that story and treating them as an individual, not a collective, kind of a group. And so she did that very well, very intentionally, and very consistently.
One thing about that story, the way she talked about the runner versus the bicycle versus the motorcycle, was the point of her story with that was how she has learned to communicate. And she said, she started that off by saying, you know, I was once an angry black woman with a chip on my shoulder. And this was after I asked her about being, the challenges of being a African-American female business leader and a Christian. What are the challenges you faced? And so that was the first thing that she had really to say, was that once she told that story in that way, instead of just spouting off her opinion, she saw a different response in her supervisor, and she said, that was a turning point for me. I realize now, and I always, you know, talk and explain the whys behind what I believe. And so that was really good for me to hear too. I can tend to be a bottom line kind of person, and so but I am in HR, LD, and so I have learned a lot along the years, but I constantly have to talk more than what I really want to say. Does that make sense? So. Well, I'll say when we walked away from there, I thought, and this is actually a comment that my husband, it's kind of a life statement for him, but I just thought it is all about relationships. Because if you look at every area of the leadership model, that's how she leads, whether it's networking or valuing the person, developing relationships through volunteering. So anyway, that was one thing that I took away.
Well, I really can't add to that, to be honest, because that's really exactly what went through my mind when Craig asked the question. So I was very much encouraged by what she said in the area of relationships, but at the same time, very much challenged in my leadership in that regard.
Excellent job. All right. What are some things you liked about what this team did?